I sat at the end of my mother's perfectly decorated Thanksgiving table, watching the candlelight flicker across the faces of my family, and tried to ignore the familiar knot forming in my stomach. The turkey was golden brown, the cranberry sauce glistened in its crystal dish, and my mother, Margaret, presided over it all like a queen surveying her kingdom. Next to her sat my sister Victoria, pregnant with her second child, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her husband Derek was already on his third glass of wine, laughing too loudly at my father's jokes. I was 32 years old, and for the past 7 years, I had been working 18-hour days building a cybersecurity software company from my tiny apartment. My family knew I worked in tech, but they had long ago dismissed it as some sort of hobby that hadn't quite worked out. They didn't know about the Series B funding round last year. They didn't know about the Fortune 500 clients or the 53 employees on my payroll. And they certainly didn't know that exactly 72 hours ago. I had signed the final paperwork selling my company to a major tech conglomerate for $12.7 million. So, Sarah. My mother's voice cut through the dinner conversation like a knife. Are you still doing that computer thing? She said it the way someone might ask if you were still collecting stamps or playing in a garage band. Victoria smirked into her wine glass. I am, Mom. Business has been good, actually. That's nice, dear. She passed the mashed potatoes to my father without looking at me. Victoria just got promoted to senior marketing director. Tell everyone about it, honey. I watched as Victoria launched into a detailed description of her new corner office and her increased salary of $120,000 a year. Don't get me wrong, I was happy for her. It was a good job. But as she spoke, I caught my mother beaming at her with a pride I hadn't seen directed at me in years, maybe ever. At least one of my daughters has stability, my mother said, reaching over to squeeze Victoria's hand. The words landed exactly where she meant them to land. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was probably my lawyer, David, following up on the wire transfer details. The money would hit my account in approximately 48 hours. $12.7 million. After taxes and paying back investors, I would walk away with roughly $8.3 million. But I said nothing, just took another bite of turkey that suddenly tasted like cardboard. Sarah, when are you going to get a real job? My father asked, not unkindly, but with the tone of someone who had given up expecting much. You're not getting any younger. Victoria was already married with a house by your age. My work is a real job, Dad. I'm sure it is, sweetie, my mother interrupted. But you have to admit, you're not exactly thriving. You drive that old Honda, you rent that tiny apartment, and when was the last time you bought yourself something nice? I worry about you constantly. What they didn't know was that the old Honda was paid off and reliable, perfect for not drawing attention. The tiny apartment was actually in a building I had purchased last year as an investment property, and I lived there rent-free while collecting income from the other units. And the last thing I bought myself was a pair of Louboutin heels sitting in my closet with the tag still on, because I'd been too busy closing deals to attend fancy parties. I'm doing fine. Mom, really. Fine isn't good enough, she said, setting down her fork with a clink against the china. You should want more for yourself. Look at your sister. Look at what she's accomplished. Victoria had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to defend me. She never did. We had played these roles our entire lives. She was the golden child, the one who did everything right, who followed the traditional path, who made our parents proud just by existing. I was the one who asked too many questions, who chose the weird major in college, who started a business instead of climbing a corporate ladder. I was the question mark in my mother's otherwise perfectly written life story. After dinner, while Victoria and my mother discussed baby names in the living room, I stepped out onto the back porch. November in Seattle was cold and damp, but I needed air. I pulled my cardigan tighter and checked my phone. 3 emails from David, 2 from my accountant, and 1 from a Forbes contributor who wanted to interview me about being a woman founder in cybersecurity. The article was scheduled to run in the January issue. Hiding out here? Derek had followed me outside with 2 beers. He handed me one and leaned against the railing. Don't let them get to you. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it right. He took a long drink. For what it's worth, I think it's cool that you're doing your own thing. Takes guts. I appreciated the gesture. even if he had no idea just how much of my own thing I was actually doing. Derek was nice enough, if a bit boring. He worked in insurance and played golf on weekends. He was exactly the kind of son-in-law my parents had always wanted. Thanks, Derek. We stood in companionable silence for a moment before Victoria opened the door. Derek, Mom wants to show you the photos from our maternity shoot. Sarah, she needs help clearing the table. Of course she did. I followed my sister inside and spent the next 20 minutes washing dishes, while my mother supervised and offered commentary on everything I was doing wrong. The water was too hot. I was using too much soap. I wasn't drying the china properly. With each criticism, I thought about the number in my bank account that was coming, and I smiled. But what they didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The real storm was brewing, and it would arrive at Christmas. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas passed in a blur of legal meetings, investment consultations, and interviews with financial advisors. The money arrived exactly on schedule, and watching that number appear in my account felt surreal. I had worked so hard for so long, sacrificed relationships and sleep and any semblance of a normal life in my 20s. And now here it was, validation in the most tangible form possible. My lawyer advised me to stay quiet about the sale until the press release went out in January. The acquiring company wanted to control the narrative and timing. So I continued driving my Honda, continued living in my apartment, and continued letting my family believe whatever they wanted to believe about my life. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow, and my mother's insistence on hosting another family dinner. This time, extended family would be there too. My Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, my cousins, my grandmother, the whole production. I almost didn't go. I had received an invitation to spend the holidays in Aspen with some fellow entrepreneurs I had met at a conference, people who understood my world and celebrated my success. But some masochistic part of me wanted to be there. I wanted to see my family one more time before everything changed. I arrived at my childhood home carrying gifts I had carefully selected and wrapped. For Victoria, a designer diaper bag she had been eyeing. For my parents, a week-long stay at a luxury resort in Hawaii. For my grandmother, a first edition of her favorite book that I had tracked down through a rare book dealer. I could afford to be generous now, even if they didn't know it yet. Sarah, you're late, my mother said as I walked in, not asking why or offering to take my coat. Victoria was already there, of course, perfectly coiffed and glowing with pregnancy. Her son, my 3-year-old nephew Tyler, ran to hug my legs. Hi, buddy, I said, scooping him up. At least the kids still liked me. Dinner was another elaborate affair, prime rib this time with all the trimmings. My mother had outdone herself, and I told her so. She accepted the compliment with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. We made it almost halfway through the meal before the attacks began. Sarah, your father and I have been talking, my mother announced, setting down her wine glass. The table went quiet. We're concerned about your financial situation. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. My financial situation? Yes, dear. We know things have been difficult for you. Your little business venture hasn't exactly panned out the way you hoped. Mom, I never said... Please, let me finish. She exchanged a look with my father, who nodded for her to continue. We've decided that we're going to help you. Your father has a friend who runs a marketing firm. They're looking for someone to manage their social media accounts. It doesn't pay much to start, maybe $40,000 a year, but it's stable, and it has benefits. We think you should take it. I felt everyone's eyes on me. Aunt Linda looked sympathetic. Uncle Robert looked uncomfortable. Victoria studied her plate, and I realized with a sinking feeling that she had been part of this conversation, this intervention. I don't need help finding a job. Sweetheart, pride isn't going to pay your bills, my father said gently. We love you and we want to see you succeed. But you have to be realistic. You've given this entrepreneurship thing a fair shot. Maybe it's time to try something more conventional. More conventional, I repeated slowly. Stable, my mother corrected. Secure. Normal. You're 32 years old, Sarah. You should be thinking about your future, about retirement accounts and health insurance and maybe, just maybe, meeting someone and settling down. But you can't do any of that while you're struggling to keep your head above water with this technology fantasy. Technology fantasy. The words echoed in my head. My company, which had just been acquired for $12.7 million, was a technology fantasy. The software that was now protecting the data of 3 Fortune 500 companies was a fantasy. The team of 53 talented people I had built was a fantasy. The truth is, my mother continued, and I could hear the frustration creeping into her carefully modulated voice, you've become a financial burden, Sarah. We worry about you constantly. We lie awake wondering if you're eating properly, if you can afford your rent, if you're one emergency away from having to move back home. Do you know what that's like for us? To have one daughter who has everything figured out, and another who just refuses to grow up? The room was completely silent except for the crackle of the fireplace. My grandmother's hand found mine under the table and squeezed gently. She didn't say anything, but in that moment, I felt like she was the only one who actually saw me. Little did my family realize that the phone in my pocket held emails from venture capitalists wanting to discuss my next project, messages from CEOs congratulating me on the acquisition, and a text from my accountant confirming that my investment portfolio was now fully diversified across stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings worth approximately $9.1 million after this month's market performance. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm not a financial burden, and I don't need Dad's friend's job. Sarah, please don't be stubborn about this, Victoria finally spoke up. We're trying to help you. You can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not. What makes you think everything isn't fine? Oh, come on, my mother said, her voice rising slightly. Look at you. Look at your life. You're alone. You're barely scraping by. You have nothing to show for all these years of work. Victoria has a husband, a son, another baby on the way, a beautiful home, a successful career. What do you have? The question hung in the air like smoke. What did I have? I had freedom. I had the satisfaction of building something from nothing. I had the respect of an industry that didn't care about my marital status or my mother's approval. I had options, more options than most people dreamed of. And yes, I had money. Enough money to never worry about it again if I was smart, which I was. But I had been keeping a secret that was about to come out, whether I wanted it to or not. The Forbes article was scheduled to publish in 3 weeks. The press release about the acquisition would go out on January 2nd. My face would be in TechCrunch and the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. There was no hiding anymore, and suddenly, I didn't want to. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My hand was steady as I turned the screen toward my mother. I have this. She squinted at the numbers, not understanding at first. Then her eyes went wide. What is this? Is this a joke? That's my checking account balance. Just my checking account. Would you like to see my investment portfolio too? Or maybe the deed to the apartment building I own in Capitol Hill? Or perhaps the contract showing that I sold my company 72 hours before Thanksgiving for $12.7 million? Victoria's fork clattered against her plate. My father leaned forward, speechless. Aunt Linda gasped audibly. Uncle Robert started choking on his wine, and someone had to pat him on the back. You sold your company? Victoria whispered. For $12 million? 12.7. The announcement goes public next week, but I wasn't planning on saying anything until after the holidays. Funny how things work out. My mother's face had gone through several colors, settling somewhere between pale shock and red embarrassment. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't I tell you? I laughed, and it wasn't entirely kind. Mom, you just called me a financial burden at Christmas dinner. You've spent years dismissing my work as a hobby, a fantasy, a cute little thing I do while I wait to get a real job. You've compared me to Victoria at every possible opportunity, made it clear that I'm the disappointment, the one who can't get her life together. Why on earth would I share my success with people who were so sure I was failing? Sarah, that's not fair, my father started, but I held up my hand. Isn't it, Dad? How many times have you asked me when I was going to get serious about my career? How many times has Mom introduced me to people as her daughter who works with computers, while Victoria is her daughter, the marketing director? How many family dinners have I sat through, listening to lectures about responsibility and stability and growing up, all because I chose a different path? I pulled out my phone again and opened Forbes magazine's website. I had gotten an advance copy of the article that morning. There I was, photographed in my office, the one I had never invited my family to see. The headline read, How Sarah Mitchell Built a Cybersecurity Empire and Sold It Before 35. I passed the phone to my mother, who read it with trembling hands before passing it to Victoria. It made its way around the table, each person's expression shifting from disbelief to shock, to something that looked uncomfortably like regret. "I'm not telling you this to gloat," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. "I'm telling you because you need to understand something. Your approval and your version of success isn't the only version that matters. I've spent years working towards something I believed in, something I was passionate about, and I did it despite your constant doubt, not because of any encouragement from this family. And I succeeded. I succeeded beyond anything I ever imagined, but the saddest part is that I'm standing here, having achieved something remarkable, and all I feel is angry that I ever let your opinions make me doubt myself." My grandmother squeezed my hand again. "I always knew you were special," she said softly. "I just wish I had said it more often." The silence that followed was broken only by Tyler asking if he could have more mashed potatoes. The innocence of it made me smile despite everything. This wasn't his fault. None of this was about him or the new baby, or even really about Victoria, who I knew loved me in her own way, even if she had never stood up for me. What happened next left them speechless. I stood up from the table, suddenly exhausted by the weight of years of judgment and dismissal. "I'm going to go," I said. "Thank you for dinner, Mom. It was lovely, as always." "Sarah, wait." Victoria stood up too, her hand on her belly. "I'm sorry. I had no idea. We all just assumed. You assumed I was failing because I wasn't doing things your way. That's the problem, Victoria. Not everything I did differently was wrong. Some of it was brilliant." I gathered my coat and purse, leaving the carefully selected gifts under the tree. On my way out, my mother caught my arm. Her eyes were wet, and I couldn't remember the last time I had seen her cry. "Please don't leave like this." "I'm not leaving angry," I told her, and I meant it. "I'm just leaving. I need space from people who made me feel small when I was actually growing bigger than anyone could see. Maybe someday we can talk about this, really talk, but not tonight." I drove home through the snowy streets, and instead of feeling triumphant, I just felt tired. Tired and strangely free. The truth was out now, and whatever came next would at least be built on honesty. The week between Christmas and New Year's was quiet. My mother called twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. Victoria texted asking if we could meet for coffee. I told her I needed more time. My father sent an email that was surprisingly thoughtful, acknowledging that they had failed to support me the way I deserved. I appreciated it, but I wasn't ready to respond. The press release went out on January 2nd, just as planned. My phone exploded with messages from old college friends, former colleagues, and people I barely remembered who suddenly wanted to reconnect. I ignored most of them. The people who mattered, the ones who had supported me during the hard years, already knew. The Forbes article published on January 15th. It was a good piece, fair and thorough, highlighting not just the sale but the journey, the obstacles I had overcome, the innovations my team had developed. My mother texted me a link to the article with just 3 words. "I'm so proud." I stared at those words for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond with anger, to point out that she should have been proud all along, that pride after public validation wasn't worth much. But another part of me, the part that was tired of carrying resentment, just wanted to move forward. I invited my family to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown in late January. All of them came. My parents, Victoria, Derek, even my grandmother. We sat in a private room, and for the first time in my adult life, they asked me real questions about my work. They listened to my answers. They apologized, some more eloquently than others. "I'm sorry I didn't see what you were building," my mother said, her hands wrapped around her wine glass. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to prove yourself, and I'm sorry I compared you to your sister. That was wrong, and it was unfair to both of you." Victoria nodded, tears in her eyes. "I should have defended you more. I should have told Mom and Dad to back off. I was comfortable being the favorite, and that was selfish." "I don't need either of you to flagellate yourselves," I said. "I just need you to understand that there are different ways to be successful, different timelines, different paths. My life doesn't look like Victoria's, and that's okay. It doesn't mean either of us is doing it wrong." "Your life looks pretty damn good to me," Derek said, raising his glass. To Sarah, who quietly became a badass while we were all too blind to notice. We laughed, and it felt good. real. Like maybe we were finally starting to see each other as we actually were, not as who we thought each other should be. Over the next few months, I made changes. I moved out of my tiny apartment into a beautiful loft in downtown Seattle, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound. I started traveling, not for business, but for pleasure. I went to Italy and ate pasta in Rome. I hiked in New Zealand. I spent a week in a meditation retreat in Bali, trying to figure out what came next. I also started mentoring young women in tech, particularly those starting their own companies. I knew what it was like to be underestimated, to be dismissed, to work twice as hard for half the recognition. If I could make that journey easier for even one person, the whole experience would mean something. My relationship with my family slowly healed, though it would never be quite the same. We were more careful with each other now, more aware of our words and their weight. My mother made an effort to ask about my life without judgment. Victoria and I started having real conversations, sister to sister, not golden child to black sheep. But the biggest change was internal. I stopped seeking validation from people who had spent so long refusing to give it. I stopped measuring my worth by their approval. I had proven something to myself through building and selling my company, and that was enough. On Thanksgiving the following year, exactly 1 year after my mother had called me a financial burden, I hosted dinner at my new place. I cooked the turkey myself, or tried to, with mixed results. My family came, including Tyler and his new baby sister Emma. We ate and laughed, and when my mother complimented the meal, I knew she meant it. As I looked around my table at these imperfect people who loved me imperfectly, I realized that revenge wasn't really what I had wanted. Justice, maybe. Recognition, certainly. But mostly I had just wanted them to see me, really see me as I was. And now they did. The money was nice. The success felt good. But the real victory was quieter than that. It was sitting in my own home, living my own life, answering to no one but myself, and finally feeling like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.